drivers, creative problem solving, and identifying the hot buttons make her a go-to resource for her team, clients, and the broader real estate community. Lindsay, thanks so much for being part of Design Connections. Welcome, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Certainly, as Stephen said, I wish we were all together somewhere warm. It is not warm in Dallas, Texas today, where I am. So happy to be at home and with you all in this format if we can't be somewhere warm. So Robert certainly extended the invitation to ask questions. I just want to reiterate that this is the topic of selling design services and then managing client expectations is obviously a huge topic that we could talk about for an entire Design Connections, multiple days, but we've got an hour here. I've put together some content that I hope you all find valuable, but I very much welcome questions, even if they aren't covered in kind of the meat of what I've put together. Please don't hesitate to ask them. Robert and I were discussing kind of business development in this marketplace now, where we're separated and we're virtual. So feel free, ask away. I would absolutely love that. But I'm gonna share the screen and get into what I've prepared. Okay, looks like we're good. Okay, so selling the value of design services and then managing client expectations. So what in the world happens after you actually win a piece of business, right? What do you do after that? Well, so it is, right? Selling is storytelling. And I think that's really the foundation of what I believe about selling design services. The absolute best salespeople are experts in their field and are passionate about what they do. And I think that comes through. So I'm going to tell you a few different stories about myself throughout this presentation. So setting myself up to sell this service to you guys today, I would position myself as Robert did. I'm the president of Corgan. I have been in Texas for 22 years practicing workplace design, and I have facilitated countless visioning sessions with Fortune 1000 customers, helping them figure out how to take the right risk with their workplace, how to push design forward, how to use their workplace as a tool. And so today, I'm going to take all of that experience to talk to you all about selling design services. So you can be the judge if I position myself correctly for selling what I'm trying to sell you guys today. And we'll talk a little bit more about positioning yourself differently in different situations later. So I'm going to touch just a little bit on design services today. I think first you really have to capture, what are you selling? We have a tremendous opportunity right now as designers, as people who sell products, equipment, furniture in this industry. There's never been a greater lens on the workplace, how people work, where people work, than there is right now. So we'll talk about that. Then I already set the stage for this. What's the story? I just am passionate about, it's got to be a story. You've got to pull people in. They want to have to become part of your orbit, right? Projects take a long time. It's a real relationship that people are establishing when they decide to work with you and your team. And then I am going to talk a little bit about the sales pitch. I do some presentation training, and so I thought this was a great opportunity to bring a little bit of that in today. And then at the end, we'll just wrap up with, okay, so you won. Now what? Now you got to make good on all those promises, and you have to manage that relationship. So hopefully this will touch on what many of you came to hear today. So design services today. So design is big business, and it's just continuing to get bigger, which is exciting, right? So in 2020, a lot of the different, and I didn't quote which lists I got all these from. everybody knows there's a million different lists and rankings out there. I just wanted to drive home the point here. The top 10 US-based architecture firms last year, in a challenging year, combined for over $4.1 billion in revenue. And then depending on which list you look at of interiors practices or of the interior division of those practices, in 2019, those fees, interior design fees, topped 4.5 billion. That was the highest mark ever recorded. Corporate office design fees were at almost $2 billion of that, and followed right behind by hospitality and healthcare. So this is big business, and it's only growing. You know, the exposure that offices have today, the role that workplaces play in sales for our customers, in storytelling, in recruiting, in retention, that's not going away. I know the future of the workplace has been debated in but I believe the workplace is evolving, certainly not going away, and will very much be a part of the ecosystem of the places that we work in the future. But now more than ever, what are we even selling? This is what gets me really excited, and we're going to talk about for a few minutes. I mean, this took me maybe 5 minutes pull just these few articles together. I know everyone in this seminar today has read more online articles probably than they ever have in their career. So what is the new reality? Is the workplace dead? Long live the workplace. Working from anywhere is possible but not sustainable. The future of work, reimagining the workforce, belonging, bringing people back to the office. I mean, we have a tremendous amount to offer customers of every size, from every industry, whether they have 5 people and they're looking for the right co-working opportunity, or whether they're looking for a corporate campus to reimagine or create. So the first thing you have to do is really hone in on what are you selling and why. So here's kind of what I would call the basics, what most of us are probably selling today, right? So strategy has become huge, and I think deciding exactly which part of that you want to play in, or where do you want to seek a partner. I almost think right now deciding as a firm or as a practitioner, where is your expertise and where do you want to really let the marketplace know that you want to engage? Is in strategy. Are you prepared to dive in and help organizations figure out, you know, how to figure out their remote workforce? How much is going to be shared desking? How do we need to evolve space typologies that we've had in the past? What are our workplaces missing that we now know we need because we've been missing out on connection or interaction? Are you going to sell those services? And if you are, really defining what that looks like, what the scope is, what the deliverables are, and how you're going to provide that service. Are you going to provide furniture strategy? Are you going to provide lighting design, change management? What about well building, fit well, sustainable design, branded environments? So I almost think step one is backing into what, as a practitioner or as a firm, what is your expertise? What are you selling? What are your tools, experience, and deliverables? And really getting all that down on paper before you go out into the marketplace to try to sell it. I'm going to take that just a little bit further, or dive a little bit deeper into it, because this is a little bit of a soapbox maybe. The basic services of interior design, you could argue if this has already happened or we're just on the verge of it, have been commoditized. So when I say basic services, programming, planning, design, construction documentation, and then getting it built. That is basic services. And in most marketplaces, and Corgan, we have offices across the country, we pretty much know what the market will bear in terms of fees for those things. Although market to market right now, it's a little bit, can be a little bit of a bloodbath as everyone is really needs the work, right? So that is not where you're going to differentiate yourself. So I started this on the previous slide of really deciding, are you playing in some of these other specialties? You can really start to see how it can build on each other. So I call this group, the traditional ads, that you could either have a partner firm, a specialty practice that you partner with to provide these types of services to your clients, or cultivate these expertises inside your own teams. I believe there was a panel about the expanding project team, and this really goes hand in hand in that for me. So signage and wayfinding is huge. Branded environments, furniture services. I mean, the budget dollars for furniture just continue to go up, and I believe post-pandemic, as we look for more modularity and more flexibility, we're just going to see more of our projects really be furniture and fixtures versus traditional construction. Lighting design, acoustics, huge. We actually brought an acoustician onto our team about a little over a year ago because we were adding that consulting service on pretty much every project. Environmental branding, so creative content creation. So not just signage and wayfinding, but are you working with the marketing teams of your clients to create new creative content for branding, both digital and 2D integrated into the design? And sustainability. So this, to me, you've got basic services, which I would argue are pretty commoditized. Now you can really start to differentiate yourself with all or any one of these types of services, and how do you bring that to bear, whether in a partner or with your inside your own practice. So the next layer I really put on this is strategy and consulting. Again, a key decision. Are you partnering for these services, or are you cultivating these expertises inside your own firm or practice? Workplace strategy, standards development. I should say standards redevelopment, which is what everybody's doing now, that we've got this program, and how does it need to adapt based on what we've learned during the pandemic. Workforce assessments. This is something we're doing a lot of right now, and we're certainly seeing more and more demand for it as companies want to find out how their employees are feeling about virtual and remote work. How do they think they did? How did they get feedback from their manager? How can we get a pulse on the entire organization and then feed that back into our programming? Change management. We've had a lot of clients whose spaces we did some time ago come back to us again for change management during this period, just asking for help in rolling out certain programs, safety protocols, the back to the office program, brand consulting, and technology integration. So now we're just building on these layers, and you start to really understand how complex interiors projects are today. That sell our services, I think you need to have a viewpoint on all these things. I don't think you have to provide all of these services, but you need to have a viewpoint on them and know where you would send your client to get them if you feel that they are needed. And so the last layer of this cake, if you will, is what's emerging. And this is where the really cool, kind of weird, kind of fun stuff is, right? And I didn't even list it all here. But how, as designers, we get engaged in the conversation about health and wellness in the workplace. We are touching it with building programs and with Fitwell, but there's even more ways to make workplaces responsive to the needs of us as humans, right? Olfactory architecture. So there is a team at Corgan that is really passionate about this. So why don't our sense of smell is our most powerful? Why don't we use our sense of smell in creating places, in creating wayfinding? So that's a really cool emerging category, just research and development on its own, developing new products, researching new ways of working and new ways of managing work. New working models. So completely helping organizations that want to flip to a shared desking model or want to flip to a spoke model. And then content production. We've actually made a lot of video content for our clients over the course of the pandemic. We have that as a resource, and it became something that our clients are really wanting. Then beyond this, you've got AI, all of the things with artificial intelligence, computational design. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's an incredibly exciting time to be in architecture and design. So in my mind, we've started our industry with really the basic services, and what we can now provide, if you choose to, the sky is almost the limit, which is why I go back to that point, really deciding who you are, who your firm is, and what you're going to provide and why, and what's that story. That's the foundational element. You can't really sell it until you're concrete and belief about what you're selling, in my opinion. And then you got to tell the story, because what are our clients buying? Well, they're buying a team of experts, right? So that's pretty simple on the surface, that they like, that have history, that they trust, and that they want to spend time with. And chemistry, I would tell you, the projects that I've been part of winning over my career, often that's the first thing out of people's mouth when you get awarded the job. They just felt like the team was a great fit. And when you lose, it's often the first thing I've been told, it just wasn't a fit. They just didn't feel the chemistry with the team. There just wasn't a connection. And so all that other stuff, the millions of square feet of experience and the glowing recommendations from other clients, does that even matter at the end of the day if you can't make that connection? So we're going to spend a little time talking about telling those stories. I'm going to take a sip of water. It's so funny not being in the room with an audience. No matter how many times I do this, not being in a room with the audience. So this book is so old. My dad gave me this book written in like 96 or 97, but it is called Selling the Invisible. I still have a copy sitting on my desk at my office, and I do pick it up from time to time because it is just, it's a salesman's book. And what does he mean by selling the invisible? Selling the invisible is selling service. So those of us selling design services have no widgets, right? We're selling ourselves, our team, our people, our experience. And I have always loved this quote from this book. In most professional services, you're not really selling expertise because your expertise is assumed. And because your prospect cannot intelligently evaluate your expertise anyway. Instead, you're selling a relationship. And I would say if everybody thinks back in their mind for a minute on a failed sales pitch, and you really start to examine why it went wrong, this crux of, did you assume that the customer could really evaluate your expertise in providing design services? I mean, so many clients really have no idea what they're about to embark on. They may have a vision, they may have been through a renovation before, or they may be doing this for the very first time, creating a new space, a new headquarters, new hospital, new school, whatever it is. And so do they really even know what they're evaluating? Or is it really just that relationship, and do they trust you or not? I also think we often, so if you are invited to participate in interviewing for a project or proposing on a project, your expertise is absolutely assumed. If you get to the point of being in the final 3 or 4 or 5 competing for the work, you're no longer need to be qualifying yourself that we can space plan. We can, make a beautiful space. It is really much more about the details, about solving problems, about communication, and about making that connection. So I love the book. It is from the 90s. So don't, if you get into it, it's not all going to be completely relevant. It's a little bitty book though, and it is still on Amazon. I checked. So this is part of a class I've taught before, and I do believe this. It is art, it is science, and it is magic. So selling services, selling yourself as a professional, the art is really figuring out, in my opinion, how to listen, how to be trustworthy, how to show your passion, and how to tell stories. So that's the art piece, which certainly takes practice. Science, there are so many books out there about presentations, about sales, about what people buy, about sticky ideas. So there is a lot you can read, but keeping it short, what's the point? And I'll talk about that in a minute. Listening for repetitive questions. This one, learned from a great professional presentation coach here in the Dallas area named Melinda Marcus. When you haven't answered somebody's question, they're going to repeat it again in a different way. And I really find this is a make or break situation. If you think you've answered something, so someone has said, do you think the schedule for this project is doable? Yes, we think it's doable. And then you move on. And then somebody says later, is 6 months going to be enough time to get this project done? Yeah. We answered that a couple minutes ago. Well, you didn't, because they wouldn't keep asking it if there wasn't some doubt cast in their mind. And they're really looking for you to say, I'm hearing some concern about the schedule. Is there anything in particular you want us to address? Is there anything in particular that you're concerned about? I'm telling you, you can win or lose an opportunity in a moment like that. So that's just one example about the science that's out there. I absolutely love reading books about business, about presentation, because I think you can glean something from any of them. Repeating back what you heard, that's a real science thing of presentations. People love to know, especially if they're about to hire you for something, that you heard them and the confirmation that you heard them. And asking questions. Don't we all like to have questions asked of us and have an opportunity to talk? So that's the science in my mind. And then the magic. And so much of it is magic. I have certainly left with my team plenty of presentation opportunities where this was pre-pandemic, got in the elevator and we all look at each other and we're like, well, that's not gonna, that didn't work out too well. That's not going to be our job. And then only to be surprised by finding out we did make a connection with somebody. So in the magic category, I just say, the magic part, decide what your story is, say one thing, say it again, and use stories to wrap that point around. All that sounds pretty easy, but deciding what that thing is probably the hardest part. Okay, here's another great book. I'm only going to give you two today. This one is not from the 90s. This one's a little bit newer, or it's been published several times. It's called The Art of the Pitch. It's a fantastic book. This is one of my favorite quotes. Just spend a bit of time bringing the same level of creativity to selling the work as you brought to creating the work. So I think this should be a sales mantra for every architect and designer, because if you take for one moment and think about how much time we spend agonizing over the details of design, over millwork details, over the perfect finishes, perfect lighting, amount of hours that go into any project that we're awarded. And then think about, how long did your team spend getting ready for, preparing for, practicing, honing the message for the last opportunity that you pitched for? Not saying they're supposed to be equal, but I love this from The Art of the Pitch, really thinking about the care that you take in design of the work, How much care are you taking in preparing for the sales pitch? And how often are you reinventing it and rethinking it? So these are for real sketches, and I started keeping these several years ago, mostly because some people didn't believe this is actually how it works for me. So if I am the pursuit leader, and I could get on such a soapbox about a pursuit leader. This kind of depends on how big your firm and how big your teams are. Every pursuit only has one leader. I hope everybody's writing that down. But I welcome any debate on it as well. You can have 14 people working on a pursuit, but at the end of the day, just like a project needs a leader, a pursuit needs a leader. Who's going to make the call on our message? Who's going to make the call on we're done messing with this presentation? Who's going to make the call on who speaks when and who closes that deal? So I am really passionate about that, yet it is a battle I fight on my own teams all the time because people are like, oh, we're both doing it. No, one. Anywho, let me get off that soapbox. So you got to craft a message. A pursuit needs a strategy. I don't care if it's 5,000 square feet or if it's 1,000,000 square feet. And part of that is doing your homework. So who are these people? And what do we know about the project? Who are the players? Can we find out who the decision maker is, who we think the decision maker is, who we think the decision maker is? Can we find out more? Who is cultivating as much information as possible about this opportunity? And then that pursuit leader, putting your team together. So now that we've learned a lot, so we know these people had a bad experience. They went through a renovation, they tried an occupied renovation, it took forever. Did we learn something about that we know, okay, we need a project manager on this that is so detailed that they know they're going to get a weekly communications report and they're going to feel great about keeping a pulse on the whole project. So how can you take what you learned to put the best possible team? Do we need to partner? Do we need some outside consultants to really bolster our message? What's the tone and direction? And did you learn some of that when you learned about the organization? I am pretty passionate about, your brand. You should not sacrifice your brand. Not everybody agrees with this. I know that. This is my opinion. So all of our presentations look like Corgan. They are branded Corgan. That doesn't mean that we don't change our tone, that we don't have some presentations that are more lighthearted if we know the personality of that leader, some that are much more serious, filled with a lot more data versus maybe more fun, anecdotal type stories. So that's really important. But I kind of cringe when I see that a firm has branded their presentation to that company. That company knows their brand. They know who they are. They don't need your company to morph into that brand. And it's a funny thing that I see design firms do a lot. And I always find it really interesting. Sorry, side opinion there. And then how are you going to drive engagement when you're selling these services? So I feel the worst after whether it's a client meet and greet or official presentation when there wasn't any dialogue. And it doesn't always mean that we weren't successful, but I know if we can get people engaged, that makes a huge difference. Demonstrate your value. What are you bringing to the table? And then the hardest part. So after I said all that, you have a million ideas, right? Key messages, and there can be no more than 3. It's the grocery store principle, right? And that's in selling the invisible. People will not remember. They're going to talk to multiple firms, right? They will not remember. If you have 7 key points and we're good, the best at this, and we're going to do this, nope, they didn't get it. So these little drawings, the poor marketing team that works with me, this is how I really start out. Thinking about what is the message, what's the process. So the North American campus of Minnesota was a huge win for our firm several years ago. That piece of paper, and there was like 5 more behind it, was the beginning of the strategy that won us that project. So if somebody's not thinking through it, then you're missing a critical step. There's the other thing throughout this is a consistent approach. I started touching on this. We don't sacrifice our brand. So if you go to if somebody said, oh, you should talk to Lindsay and her team about this project, and somebody went to my LinkedIn page, guess what? It looks like Corgan. It has our brand messaging. It has a photo of one of our projects, which I try to update. If then they asked us for a quals package, they're going to get a very clear we're going to start telling that story the first chance we get. Then they meet us in an interview, same story, more detail being built. And then these always get in different order, but whatever the next step, if it's RFQ, we're just continuing to layer on more information into the same story. And it sounds so easy. It sounds easy to me when I put this slide together. It's not. All along the way, you're having new ideas and what about this and what about this? Just being very intentional throughout that whole process. Okay, how am I doing on time? So I showed you this at the beginning. This is how I pitched myself to you guys at the very beginning if I was qualified to be giving this presentation today. This is a little bit about what I meant of not sacrificing really the Corgan brand, but a different tone. So this could be for a client who was a little bit more playful, or maybe the CEO went to SMU, as did my husband. Subtle, not subtle. Here in Arkansas connection. See, I'm fun. Don't you want to work with me? So you can, along with some questions that we might touch on in the interview, why do I love what I do? So that could be the beginning of a story. That's a different story than I told you a minute ago. Same person, same job, different angle. Where do you go from there? Or I'm Lindsay Wilson. I'm the interiors market sector leader, and it's my job to make sure you can take calculated risks for the future of your workplace. And I'm going to introduce you to the rest of my team who's also going to make that possible. Different tone. I set you up. You're expecting something different from me from that point. So it really, I do all that just to say, it really starts from minute go. And I just think these opportunities get missed a lot. Just a few kind of fundamental things in my mind, things you can work on. Know your story, and it should be a short story. Why are you important for this project? This is an activity we go through all the time. Everybody in one sentence should be able to tell me why they are important to that client for that project. Practice on your own out loud. Trust me, this kills me. If you have never said words out loud before, how in the world do you know what they're going to sound like? And I have presented this type of content to so many different groups before. And so I usually ask show of hands of how many people practice out loud. And then I ask how many people think I practice out loud. I still do. I do it in the mirror while I'm drying my hair, usually on the day of a pitch. I'm going through the whole thing. And all that does is free you up to be more reactionary to everything else that's happening in the meeting. Practice with your team. Sometimes this is hard, but man, it pays off when you can. Smooth transitions, that's really what you're practicing for. You're not necessarily practicing for what is every word every person's going to say, but how do we get in and out? Because that connectivity is what people are looking for. And prep for questions, especially if you have time. During the interview, relax, easier said than done, but people feel that vibe, right? Looking at people, how hard is this? In the virtual world, that means looking at the camera. So hard. It makes such a difference though. Not looking at the little, depending whatever format you're in, where are all the little boxes and where are you? If you can close your own camera view, I do it every single time because it's so hard not to be distracted to try to see how you look, right? So looking at the camera is huge when we can't be looking at each other. Be authentic. Oh, I missed my favorites. How did I do that? Because I was looking at the camera trying to make a point. In virtual world, this is the worst because in the old days around a table with my team, man, I could give them a look and they knew that I had something that I wanted to insert, but now you're trapped in your house and you can't necessarily get that message to your team. But interrupting really shatters that connectivity in just a moment. So does piling on. The question asked and answered. Even if you think your colleague didn't give the best possible answer, don't pile on top of them and also answer it. Again, when you're trying to create that connectivity, the interrupting and the one-upping of your team, that really just sends a message about what your team is going to be like to work with. Be authentic. Personal anecdotes are great, but you got to practice them because they need to be short and they need to be something people are going to care about. I think as designers, we love the nitty gritty of, we couldn't get this material and then we had to do this and it turned out so great. What does anybody really care about? Man, we had a problem. This material we all fell in love with wasn't available. So we went out on a mission. We found another material. This is the image of it. And man, what a happy accident. It turned out perfect. We didn't give up. We didn't get down. And we found something that turned out to be even better for our customer. They didn't care about all the, traipsing around trying to find it. And try to have fun. It really does become fun. And I love nothing more than when we bring new team members into that interview process and they really enjoy it and they see how much energy you can get from making those connections with clients. Okay, last slide, and then I'm ready for questions. I hope you guys have some. So yay, celebrate. Now you have to shift gears into, you just made a zillion promises about the best team on the planet that they just hired who will do the best job ever for their project, and now you got to deliver on all that. And I think the rubber hits the road so fast. How you kick that project off, how you set the tone for how your team is going to communicate, how clear can you be about your points of contact? You got to agree on a roadmap. I love the analogy of a roadmap. I know it's cliche and gets used all the time, but it's so legit for projects. Let's set our roadmap. What are our expectations, aspirations? What are the goals that would really make this project amazing? What are the must-dos, schedule, budget, all that stuff? We've got our roadmap, but then I find people don't go, you need to roll out the map at the beginning of every meeting. You are here. How's it going? Did we deviate? What's going on? Where are some upcoming decisions you have to make? What do you need to make that decision in 3 weeks? So that just being a discipline throughout the project, I think, is a huge tool in managing expectations. A clear scope of work. Most people think a clear scope of work is most important to communicate to your client. I don't disagree. It's equally as important that your entire team is clear on the scope of work. So people aren't agreeing to do things that were outside of that scope of work, because we all know that's as soon as we get off the rails, right? Off the track. So the entire team understanding that and understanding the schedule, knowing when we have to put our pencils down, our mice down, and move on. Scattered points of contact. I think this is so huge. So, okay, I might be the principal in charge. Great. And I might have a relationship with the CEO or the CHRO who really has the vision for the project. Throughout the whole client's project team, I want to have laddered relationships with my team. So the day-to-day contact on my team needs to have a tight relationship with the day-to-day contact on their team. There is no ego about owning relationships, because managing clients' expectations is best when you've got lots of lines of communication and then your team is constantly in contact. So if there's a problem, and that's my last one, somebody hears about it quickly and you can fix it. And I say fix small problems because I firmly believe if you fix the small problems, there will be no big problems. Big problems come when small problems are not resolved. And resolving them is not just resolving something's wrong in the field, it's resolving it in the relationship. Hey, we didn't meet that expectation. We didn't meet that deadline. No excuses. I do want to let you know what happened and what we've done to make sure it won't happen again. That's how I find you really can build trust. And if you're solving those things, your clients become comfortable coming to you saying, "Hey, this didn't go great. Can we improve upon it?" If you've set an expectation, you are on board with continuous improvement. I think managing client expectations gets a lot easier. Last soapbox, and then I would love some questions. Client relationships are not built via email, ever. You can't do it. Nobody ever said, "I've been emailing with her forever and she's just so focused on client service." Pick up the phone, call somebody, follow up on the email. When we can all be back together again, getting to a meeting early on the off chance that your client has a few minutes to chat, making sure you can stay afterward. I really miss the opportunities that come out of traveling with clients. Some of best relationships, best stories, stranded at O'Hare after NeoCon, those are your clients for life. So I certainly am anxious to get back on airplanes and back in front of my customers face to face, because that's really where those relationships are built that help you sell services in the future and that help you manage those relationships for the long term. All right, Robert, bring it on. I hope there's some questions.
All right. Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I love that. To our audience, I did see a couple of questions come in, but if you have more, please put those in the Q&A chat right now, and we'll answer as many of them as we can in the time that we have remaining. So the first question that came in for you, Lindsay, is have you found any examples of successful tactics that have improved outcomes for virtual interviews pursuits versus pre-COVID, where we were mostly in person?
So we've definitely found some tactics to help with virtual. And we were already doing virtual interviews pre-COVID because so many more clients in different places in the country, dispersed project teams on the client side. So we had already been getting into that. This may make me old school. I don't know. I will never think it's better than being around the table in person, being able to read the room and really react and create conversations. What I was saying about interrupting is my least favorite part about virtual. It is so hard. It's so natural when you're in a room with somebody. They can tell that you have something you want to add, and it's so hard in this format. But things that we have found that work better, practicing that, what a boring answer. We can get away. My teams have all been together a really long time. For the most part, we can get away without practicing if it's in person. We quickly learned we need to practice 2 or more times because the handoffs are so critical. And then our preferred platform is Teams. We have found if we can dictate it, we can't always. If we can, we have found there's some capabilities inside Teams where you can make the presenters face half the screen and the content the other half, instead of all the little boxes. So trying to draw attention to different people. And then we've been using more video, short clips of video. I mean, people just get so bored looking at slides. Hopefully you guys didn't get too bored because I didn't use video today, but we've been using more video.
Yeah, great. Another question is, how do you decide whether it's better to partner with an outside firm or cultivate the talent within your firm when adding those layers of design services to your list of offerings? That's
a great question. I mean, some of it's got to be bandwidth. I know right now we're all struggling with balancing efficiency, billable work, time spent on new business. So I think the first question is really asking yourself, okay, in our current bandwidth, is this something we have the interest, expertise, and passion to take on? Or are we better suited to go find a partner who maybe is in a similar position and it's a mutually beneficial partnership? We have certainly had partnerships over the years with an understanding that we were interested in doing that work in the future. So being really upfront about it, but could they learn from us and we learn from them, and then ultimately, we kind of go our separate ways.
Right, right. Okay, great. How do you deal with pushback on fees for design services from budget conscious clients or people who ask for discounted rates, things of that nature?
So the first thing I'm going to say is going to be controversial. Um, themselves, first of all. Most of the fee pressure that we're facing is coming from within the industry, not from the outside. So firms are just, we all need the work, especially when really great opportunities come along. We really need the work. And so how lean and mean can the fees get? That is just what happens in downturn. I totally get that, but that is, in my opinion, the biggest part of the problem. Clients, I mean, we try to be as clear as we can. All we are selling are hours. So we got to talk about scope and fee in the same conversation, as well as the level of expertise as the person who's going to be completing that task. And of course, we get into these conversations all the time, but I think as much as you can talk about, here's what we're going to be doing, here's how many hours it takes, and here's the people that are going to be doing it, try to, make it not mysterious at all. I do think, back to the very beginning, people have a hard time evaluating design services. People also have a hard time evaluating how long something should take to complete. And sometimes do we end up having to kind of trade things out to make things work? Like, okay, we'll do this for that, but once we get to this phase of the project, we got to stick with this fee. We need all these dollars to complete your construction documents. Sorry, a bit of a winding answer, but
No, that's great. That's great. Well, we have a couple more questions I think we have time for, and these involve, pulling in new talent and working with the younger generation. So the first one is, what are your interviewing techniques for pulling new talent in for your teams?
I love pulling new people in, but I always do it when it risk is manageable, right? So if this is a project that we're supposed to win, so we're the front runner, but you got to check all the boxes and everything's got to go perfectly for us to win, I would not introduce somebody new. I kind of love it when these opportunities come out and they invite, I assume this happens in lots of markets, they invite, especially right now, 5, 6, 7 or more firms on. That is the perfect, your chance of winning is already like less than 20%. So bring somebody new in. And I tell those people, we have nothing to lose. We're not even supposed to win this job. There are so many people competing for it. Go for it, have fun, and we'll see what happens. And so that's usually, don't bring them into like the most high stress must win situation ever. And
Yeah,
then give them something to talk about that they know. So I always have a project in there where they were, the lead, or they picked the finishes, or they did the detailing on the ceiling. And because then they're comfortable and they can really light up talking about that project.
yeah, good point. So someone else mentioned that, we're being told that younger generations want to do business by email and not on the phone. So how do you break through that and build, if you can't build a relationship via email, which you mentioned in your presentation there?
I mean, I think you have to show people, and I mean, we face this sometime too, but if you can have somebody on a call with you or on a video call with you when you're connecting with a customer that you've had or somebody that you've worked with, I mean, sometimes you can only prove that point when they see it. I think it always makes an impression on somebody, and it's much easier in person, right? When you take a more less experienced team member with you and they see the client greet you and they're like, oh my gosh, how are you? How's Jack? What's been going? And then you reciprocate in the same way. Did you end up running that marathon? And then the light bulb of like, oh, I don't know anything about any of the people I'm working with. I'm missing an element. Otherwise, it's just kind of preaching. You're always telling them that if they don't see it kind of happen. Now, I do find young people are incredibly good at using social media to make these connections. And I'm a huge fan of that. If you're going to use your social media, though, that way, then it becomes part of your professional brand. And I've got teammates who have 2 Instagram accounts, one that's very much professional and one that's personal, because if you're going to use your social media or Instagram for business, when I talked about that cohesive image, it's now part of that image. So that's a choice you need to make really carefully, but it can be done really well.
Right. Yeah, great point. All right, I think we have time for one more. Somebody just posted an interesting question scenario here. So on the same subject of fee pushback in rural areas, people don't understand the value and don't really care to have it explained to them. Do you have a suggestion to maybe get through that barrier without making them mad, or to jump on that issue before, like in your fee proposal, without being too wordy?
That is so hard. My only thoughts there are, can you work in more of a bite-sized pieces, which is a pain, right? But it's almost like you have to have more proof points. If you've got that much pushback, say, okay, hey, let's just do phase 1. Let's do the programming and the initial planning. And I think it's going to take us, 60 hours to get you to an approved plan. You're going to love and be ready to jump on. Will you give me that opportunity, and will you compensate me X to do that? And if we do that, then let's talk about how we'd approach the rest of the project. So can you take it bit by bit and convince them of your value that way? Otherwise, the only other thing, when I say fee and scope are inexplicably tied, then you are going to give them less scope for what they've paid for. If they have paid for 2 design options for their reception area, they get 2, and you got to stop. And designers are horrible at this, present company included. You're like, oh, but now I know what you want, and I've got another idea. No, they didn't pay for it.
Good point. Well, that's all the time we have for it. Lindsay, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. We so appreciate it, and the discussion following. So thanks again for being here.
My pleasure. I hope it was time well spent.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're going to transition to our one-to-one meeting. So I'm going to call Stephen Sloan back up onto the stage, or camera, if you will, and he'll get us transitioned over. Stephen?
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Lindsay. Every time I hear Lindsay present, I feel like I personally am ready to go take on the world. Anyone else feel that way? She is inspiring. Like Rob said, now's the time we are going to switch to our one-to-one meetings. All attendees and sponsors, you can refer to your personal schedules that Bethany had emailed out. Attendees, you can find the respective tables on floor 2. You use the elevator toggle on the left side of the screen. It's important you attend all your scheduled meetings. Sponsors, you stay put at your designated table, while attendees will move between tables for each meeting. Each meeting is 12 minutes long, and we will alert you when it's time to move to your next meeting. If you have a break in your schedule, feel free to network with others on floor 1 or in one of the lounges. If you need to take a quick bathroom break or check an email, turn off your mic and camera, but don't exit the system. So with that, let's have some great meetings, everybody. Thanks so much.